Hello YouTube, Liam, the Defty Metalhead, and I'm doing a totally different video today. I am jumping on a thread response created by two of my friends here in the YouTube community, Metal Mickey and Jürgen. So those two are probably one of the, well, two of the YouTube channels that literally could not give a shit what people think about their videos, and they literally do it out of sheer passion for talking about music. And this whole thread was kind of started because, I'll be brutally honest, I'm guilty of it as well. When you show so much stuff on YouTube, it's all, this is great, this is great, this is great. Not all music is great to everybody. And when I show stuff, certainly not everyone's going to think the same way I do. And this video is basically talking about albums that aren't great to you. I mean, don't get me wrong, the ones I'm going to show you today, some people might think, what the fuck are you talking about? That's an amazing album. And you can be, you know, you're totally right for you. But for me, these 10 I picked out here, I might have liked at the start in my younger years, or I mean, a lot of these albums I've purchased before I had access to the internet, so you had to kind of blind buy them based off what you thought was cool, or you thought it was going to be good based off maybe a single, because back then you could buy singles on CD and then you go and buy the album, that kind of thing. So before anyone goes all fucking keyboard warrior on it, you've got to remember this is all personal taste, and it is purely just a bit of fun, because, you know, I would never say an album's shit, because, you know, being an artist, when you hear that, you know, that's that person's, you know, opinion of your music. But, you know, you can't love everything, and certainly I mean, I don't play any of these CDs. I listened to them the last couple of days to kind of do this video, and it was difficult. And this is the first one. So I was a new metal kid. I got into heavy metal around the year 2000, and new metal was all the rage. So back then I had to rely on TV, like MTV and stuff like that, to tell me what to like, because I didn't have the internet until maybe 2003, around that time, maybe a bit earlier. But certainly, you know, I used to go and buy my CDs from the shops purely based on what I saw and what I was told. And the first band I was really into was Korn. Now the first album, still love that album. Issues, really, really cool album. But this one, I never ever play it. Out of all the tracks on it, I purchased it purely because of the single, and that is the album Life is Peachy. Now I couldn't even tell you when this came out, maybe 96, 97, just after the first album. Title tracks there. Now out of all these tracks, I mean, I still like Korn now and again, don't get me wrong, it's like a nostalgia trip for me. So like a lot of people will say, oh, I love Iron Maiden but only the early stuff. For me, I only really like the early Korn stuff and what I heard as a kid. Newer stuff, you know, it's okay, but it's, you know, I'll be honest, I never listened to it. And on this album, the track was the Adidas track, which was a massive single where they were on like kind of an autopsy table in a morgue or something like that by memory. And that song was quite catchy, so it was always edited though, so I wanted the full version. As a teenager, I wanted to hear the swear words, so I went searching for it, picked it up. And this has not aged well for me at all. I really struggled to get through this. This guitar tone, everything is so messy, just so bitey, start-stoppy. It's just, yeah, don't get into it at all. It's nothing like the first album, and the first album's a classic. And no one ever mentions this, and, you know, there's a very good reason. Even Twist, you know, I do it just as a gag now when I'm talking about it. But yeah, that'll be my first pick. Now, second one is another one that I bought purely because of the single or singles off this album, and then I got the album and was really disappointed, and that is Sepultura Roots. I was really getting into these guys because back then the title track Roots Bloody Roots was everywhere on Scuzz TV, Kerrang TV, MTV2, so I listened to that along with Korn, you know, Slipknot, all sorts of bands, and that track was always played. And then there was Wrapped Mahata or something like that, with a weird kind of animation video. I kind of like that, but again, it was all about Roots Bloody Roots. And, you know, that was the one major selling point for buying this album. Put the album on, and back then I was really getting into my thrash just as I was coming out of new metal. And yeah, it was not thrashy at all. It was nothing like the, you know, what I thought I was going to get into. Like, because the Roots Bloody Roots has got some good catchy riffs, it's chunky. This hasn't got that at all. I mean, it's really slow, sludgy, and I'm a Doom fan, but not with Sepultura, and especially not this. The songs don't really go anywhere. They're a bit lifeless. And there's like with Doom, you have melodies which kind of make the song more interesting. This has no melodies on it. It's just really slow riffs with Max Cavalera playing 4 strings. And yeah, I mean, I saw this a couple of years ago when they toured it with the Caballera brothers, and I only went because I wanted to see Max Caballera and Igor in the flesh. And it had, I think, Overkill, Insomnium, so it had a really good support lineup, so that was kind of the major seller point for me. But the songs on here, even live, they weren't that exciting, but then they played some classics that kind of made up for it. So yeah, that would be my second pick. Now this one I got purely based off a video game, so I don't know if anyone my age would remember. I'm 32. When Guitar Hero came out, it kind of opened a whole new world of different songs you've never heard before, like Kansas, Carry On My Wayward Son, Ozzy Osbourne's Bark at the Moon, or Crazy Train, I can't remember which one it was. I think it was Bark at the Moon, and you could do the little solo on there. And there was this one, Dragonforce, Through the Fire and the Flames. That song was on there, and at the time it was the hardest song on that video game. And you know, everyone got into it, everybody did. Saw these guys on tour at the UEA probably a couple of years later with the original lineup for this album, and even then I wasn't really into them. I kind of thought it was more of a novelty thing, and you know, I like my guitar solos and that, but this is just way too over the top for me now. And even if I listen to this now, it's just insane how boring this is to me. I mean, they're still going strong, and Herman Lee is probably the most famous one out of the band now. I don't think the drummer's there anymore. The singer's certainly changed, probably the bass player as well. You know, it was very much a novelty act when I first heard this, a UK band, and yeah, it hasn't aged well at all for me. So that would be my third pick out of this 10. It's just, I mean, I'd be interested to see how other people actually still like this band or not, because I don't have a clue what they do musically these days, if they're still relevant or not. But back then, that was the only song on that album that everyone knew, and anyone even bothered to, you know, to listen to in the first place. Now, this one I purchased in my teenage years, I think. When did it come out? Yeah, late teenage years. This was new when I picked this up, and I was really looking forward to it. Took it home, and that's probably the only time I've ever since listened to it since this week, and that is Slayer's World Painted Blood. This came out in 2009, and I picked it up. I saw the cover, Slayer, all the blood effects on it. I think I would have been one of my first jobs, maybe second jobs. Yeah, second job. And I had money, disposable income, you know, I was rich in my world. And I went out and got this, ordered it, listened to it, shelved it. It might as well be called World Painted by Numbers, because it's so generic. There's nothing stands out on this album. It doesn't excite me at all. I mean, all the songs on there, I mean, Snuff and World Painted Blood are the only ones I really remember, but it's just a little bit meh, you know. And there's a lot of the mid-Slayer albums between like 99, apart from God Hates Us All, none of them really captured my imagination. First Slayer album I ever heard was God Hates Us All, and I absolutely loved that. And I went back and got Rain and Blood, South of Heaven, you know, all those really, really good albums. But this, you know, doesn't do anything for me, still doesn't now. If I want Slayer, I'll go for Rain and Blood, you know, God Hates Us All. Those two albums for me cement Slayer, you know, and I'll listen to South of Heaven and stuff like that, or Greatest Hits, but not that at all. Right, again, back in my teenage years, this band were like a staple for me. I got into these purely because I thought the cover was hilarious. So I had the Greatest Hits, which is back there, can't point, with all their shirts off, wearing loincloths, looking like Viking warriors, and that is the band Manowar. So this is the first album I picked up after I got that Greatest Hits, because I wanted something new by them, and this came out I think around 2002, 2003, yeah. And it was something I really thought I was going to enjoy. I liked the title track, it was slow, it was very epic, and I put it on and it was so fucking boring, it's unreal. Nothing jumped out, like classic Manowar, you know, Fighting the World, Blow Your Speakers, all those classic songs. And then you realise Ross the Boss is the whole reason those songs were really cool, because you listen to this, there's none of that catchiness, there's no epicness, there's no riffing. It's just chuggy, sludgy, horrible, boring Manowar, telling about how they are so superior to every other band, and you know, they're the best thing in the world. So, you know, I just was really bitterly disappointed, and I played this maybe 2 or 3 times, and then this has been shelved for years and years and years, until recently I tried to re-listen to it again. And the other major problem I have with this album is the guitar player, who's also a massive nonce now, a convicted paedophile, just adds to the whole I don't want to listen to this album, and it's one of the ones I kind of pretend doesn't exist. And you know, I'm surprised I still have it, but I think it's worth a little bit because it's not exactly an easy album to find, I don't think. So yeah, you know, classic Manowar, all you know, I'm all in. Fighting the World, that lot, brilliant. This, no one talks about it, and there's a good reason for that. Right, next one is probably the most misleading album I think I ever purchased. I'm a massive Candlemass fan. People know I have a tattoo. I love the band, and I picked this up not really knowing what I was going to get. It had the logo on it. I thought, brilliant, I'm gonna love it, and that is Candlemass's Dactylis or Glomerata. Now, this came out in 1998 and sounds nothing like Candlemass. So it is Candlemass by name because it is Leaf, his project. He kind of owns Candlemass, should we say. He writes all the music. You know, his name is Candlemass. Like, everything comes from him, the lyrics, the lot. And he was doing another project, but they wanted to put it under this name so it would sell, because at the time I think that project, you know, it wasn't going to sell. So they put it under the Candlemass moniker to shove the logo on the bottom there. And it sounds nothing like Candlemass. This is more like stonery, kind of doomy, like kind of like Caius kind of sound. Couldn't be further from the epic Candlemass with the shreddy solos or the epic kind of power chordy riffs. There's nothing like that. And I was so bitterly disappointed when I purchased this. I still dislike this album strongly, just purely because why would you do all this knowing that it's not going to sound like, you know, any of the Candlemass catalogue? You put this in, probably the first, there's one after this one which had the same issue as well, but all the rest are epic. Vocally, it's very operatic. There's shreddy guitar solos, there's big epic power chords. This has none of that, and it stands out so badly. And you know, again, no one ever talks about this album, and for a very good reason. Now, this one might be a little bit controversial, but like I say, you know, it's all personal opinion. I love me some Tom G. Warrior, and Celtic Frost I discovered through Greatest Hits called Parched of the First I Am Dying or something like that, which I've got back there. And I fell in love with his just simple riffing, the vocals, everything, you know, and I still love them to this day. But this album I never listened to, and that is Into the Pandemonium by Celtic Frost. This came out in 1999 or maybe a bit earlier. I know this is a repress, so I couldn't tell you the exact date. But I mean, some people love this album, some people don't. It is very much out there. I mean, the first track, Mexican Radio, is it? That is a weird song for a Celtic Frost sound, you know. Considering I got into Monophist first, maybe, then I backtracked to the very first one with all the really simple riffs, and then towards the Megatherion with that brilliant H.R. Geiger artwork, and then this, and then yeah, I just, even now I still really struggle. I mean, is it one of it Oriental Masquerade, or one of them is just like a kind of like a drum and bass kind of song, and then there's operatic vocals that are just, it just sound really weird, and it is just a bit too out there for me. And I can see some of the songs on here are okay, but when you add it up as a whole album, it is really disappointing. And that's kind of what this whole video response is about, you know, albums that leave you disappointed. Not saying they're shit, but this was so disappointing, and it still is when I listen to it. You kind of have moments where you're like, yeah, it's awesome, Celtic Frost are great, and then some of it you just scratching your head going, what the fuck's he doing, you know, who wrote that, why would you put that in there? So that's certainly a strong contender. And the same for this one. I absolutely love this band, but this album has maybe one song on it I really like, and the rest completely shelvable. And that is My Dying Bride with 34.788%. I mean, straight away, the title of this album is terrible. And reading in the book that I have that explains all their back catalogue and all the history of the band, this was written by mostly all by Calvin, who's a former guitar player of My Dying Bride, and he was going through a really bad time in his life, and he used this album to kind of pour his energy into writing. And sadly, it just didn't pay off. It was a bit too out there. The artwork as well, very 90s looking artwork. This came out around 1998, I believe. And the songs on it are just very bit too out there and a bit too weird. It doesn't kind of mesh well, apart from maybe one or two songs with the rest of the My Dying Bride catalogue. I mean, they're a band that do whatever they want anyway, but this album, you know, no one, I mean, apart from your die-hard My Dying Bride fans, they'll probably just say this is probably the worst album by them. I mean, Base Level Erotica is my favourite track off here, and I know they play The Whore, The Cook and The Mother live quite a few times, but the rest of it, I mean, there's a section where there's just a phone call with an answering machine, and that kind of goes through the song. It's just boring as fuck. I mean, I don't understand why they thought, I mean, it could have been a bit arty. I mean, music is art, but that's me just kind of trying to defend one of my favourite bands, because this album is boring, really boring. Now, this next one I bought at a gig. I got to see this band after discovering them through a certain movie, and the band is Anvil, and this is the album This Is 13. Now, this was brand new when I purchased this. I went and saw them live at the Underworld in London. They had Lauren Harris supporting them, really weird gig. Had Richie Faulkner on guitar for Lauren Harris, who's obviously had recent heart surgery issues. Amazing guitar player in Judas Priest. Back then, when I saw him live for the first ever time, he was pretty much trying to be Zakk Wylde. The way he played, the posing, had the Les Paul, and then the bass player in her band thought he was Nicky Sixx. Really weird gig. Then Anvil came on, played all the greatest hits. Absolutely loved it. I mean, I loved me some early Anvil, you know, proper classic stuff. I got the greatest hits up there. Bought this thinking, yeah, I'm gonna get me some new Anvil. Boring. Absolutely boring. I mean, I won't lie, he's probably got the worst vocals in music ever for me. I mean, it's just hilarious how you can have such a good guitar player but not find a vocalist to kind of combine that guitar playing. I mean, you got Rob Reiner, the drummer? Brilliant drummer. And, you know, they have some tasty bass players who can do some really cool licks and stuff like that, but, you know, why would you let him sing? I still don't know why he does all the singing, because his voice is awful. I mean, it's laughable, to me anyway. It's just hilarious. But this album, again, boring. Absolutely boring. Slow. Nothing really stands out. It was produced by a former Black Sabbath producer from the 80s, and they thought we'd help out some British dude, but does nothing for me. So yeah, really disappointed when I heard that. And lastly, the most misleading album in this pile for me, Cancer, death metal band here in the UK. Now my friend Mark showed a Cancer album in his Fred response, and I am too. This is Spirit in the Flames, that was gifted to me as some BCLT not too long ago. I love Cancer. Early Cancer's brilliant. Even the new stuff is really cool. This, it's weird because I never heard of it before. I didn't even know this album existed, should I say. I put it on and it's like Cancer trying to be Pantera. I mean, it must have come out 2005, yeah. So just as I finished high school, this came out. And yeah, all the bands are like that, you know, trying to sound like Pantera, trying to be relevant. And this is guilty of that as well. It's just so, I mean, the guitar tone's really cool and the production's not too bad. Vocals are rubbish, not what I expected from Cancer, especially from his name's Jeff, I think, the singer. It's not the same as what I was used to, and luckily he's gone back to that older kind of style, and you know, they're making really cool music again. But this, it just sounds like, you know, he's trying to be Phyllis Armlow and they're trying to be Pantera, and it really stands out. And the fact they kept the band name all the same and all that kind of thing with a really dull artwork as well, just adds to the misery. So yeah, so that's my 10. So this whole Fred response was called 10 terrible albums that aren't sent anger, and it is just purely a bit of fun. So let me know down below what you think of my picks. Obviously everyone's going to have their own opinion, so obviously let me know, because the whole point of music is to kind of find something you like. So I'd be loved to hear if you think these albums are great and why, because I don't think they're great at all. I think they're average or below average. So yeah, if you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing, and also if you've watched this to the end, please like the video to help me out. I will pop content around my head now so you can go check out other videos, and hopefully I'll speak to you all in the comment section below. Take care and cheers.